much, Jake. All right, we are so excited to have Paul Powers back with us. He did a webinar for our series last spring on Maine turtles. So if you're interested in viewing that webinar, it's excellent. You can take a look at our archives on both the Blue Hair Distress and the Island Hair Distress websites. But we're so excited to have him back today. He is a Maine master naturalist, as well as a wildlife photographer for the past 20 years. And it's really cool. He uses his photographs as an educational tool and donates many of his works to centers and institutions to promote preservation of wildlife and raise funds for rehabilitation. So Paul, thank you so much for being here with us. We're really excited to hear all about frogs, and I will pass it on.
As like we like to say, let's hop right to it. So thank you for that very kind introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me back. It was a thrill to talk to you all about turtles, but now it's going to be even a greater thrill, especially around this time of year, to talk about our amphibian friends and our frogs. So with that, I'm going to attempt to do the screen share and see if we can put it up. Now, can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation? So that's a thumbs up. Okay, so let's get started. This afternoon, we're going to talk about Maine's native toads and frogs. And as I mentioned earlier, if you were online just a little bit ago, we're going to try to make this as interactive as we possibly can under quarantine conditions. And we're going to ask several questions throughout the presentation and test our knowledge about what we do and do not know about Maine's native toads and frogs. So let's get started. So first of all, I have to thank additional support was provided for this presentation by Unity College, Chewonki Foundation, the Center for Wildlife, Seven Lakes Alliance, Maine Wildlife Park, Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. What they have allowed me to do is allow me to come into their facilities with my camera equipment and my lighting equipment and photograph their ambassadors, which in turn then allowed me to do these presentations. So as mentioned, I'm a Maine master naturalist and a wildlife photographer. I've been doing wildlife photography in the field for about the last 25 plus years. And it wasn't until I enrolled into the Maine Master Naturalist program that changed everything upside down for the way that I started photographing. It was during that time that I became a big fan and a supporter of an individual photographer named Joel Sartori. Many of you may know Joel. He does phenomenal work about going around and capturing photographs of ambassadors throughout the world for documentation purposes that we will have a reference point well after maybe they are no longer with us. And it was so enlightening. What he's done is captured them on black or white backgrounds and has identified just the subject by themselves, which has no distracting features of landscape or anything else, and so that the viewer can then just concentrate strictly on the subject itself. So with that, as I mentioned, the facilities that I had to thank at the beginning, or wanted to thank at the beginning, was they allowed me to come in, and this is me at Chewonki, and though it's not, those that are quick studies will note that that's not a frog but a turtle. And this is Carolina, that is their ambassador. This is a box turtle, but this is the setup. And I wanted to show you this and explain this to you, that no individual ambassador is hurt. I don't even touch the ambassadors at all. That's left up strictly to the handlers at their facilities. And you can see the handler is off to the side here. But then from there, I'll take the photographs back to my home studio and develop them into pure black backgrounds. I prefer black over white. So, but this is what we'll do. And every facility that I went into had allowed me to do it. And each one of them, the handlers handled their animals. And I have to say, because they are ambassadors, and I keep using the word ambassador, these are these are wildlife that they use to teach all of us about the importance of the wildlife. And so they're fairly used to being around humans. So the stress factor, in my opinion, which I can't answer for the animal, but in my opinion, was a little bit lower. So that's good. So what's going on? Well, around 40% of the amphibian species are threatened with extinction, and that's worldwide. That's just not in Maine, but that's worldwide. So okay, Maine has a way of determining the status of each one of these. And so what they'll use is they have a way of recording. So Maine will say, okay, if you look up American bullfrog, you'll see that it may be LC, which means it's the state least concern. I'm not saying that it doesn't have a concern status, but for right now, it's doing fairly well. The next one might be state special concern. There's habitat loss, or there's pollution, or there's global warming, or something that's having an effect on the outcome of these animals. But for right now, it's requiring the state to take a little more special concern over them. Then those that are threatened, meaning that somebody has come in, a residential area has done a development where there used to be vernal pools and they have totally eliminated it. So some of the species might be threatened or totally gone. And then the one that we're most concerned about is E, which is the state endangered, which is they're on the brink of extinction here in the state of Maine. So if you're not sure why you should care about amphibian species, well, consider these 9 amazing benefits. And what's unique about 9, we're going to learn about that in just a second, but let's consider these 9 amazing benefits that they bring. First of all, amphibians play an important role in nature, both as predator and prey. So what they'll do is they make their homes primarily in lakes or streams, and they'll eat various insects that would be like mosquitoes and midge and so on. But then in turn, they will feed our other wildlife population and keep them healthy, such as the great blue heron and the raccoons and the possums and so what they basically are saying is they're keeping the circle of life going. They, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they eat pest insects, which benefits agriculture around the world and helps minimize the spread of disease. Amphibian skins contain a myriad of different types of peptides, offering possible medical cures for a variety of human diseases. And it's already used in some painkillers, high blood pressure medicine, and to block HIV transmission, and to treat antibiotic resistant bacteria strains. As species disappear, so do the potential treatments. So this is why we should have a special interest in our amphibian friends. Amphibians also, these are the first, nature's first true superheroes. We can all identify with today's Hollywood superheroes and marvel at their capabilities, but really nature had done this long before this. In the true amphibian ability to regrow limbs is being studied to help shed light in how to improve tissue regeneration. And amphibians have a special place in a variety of human cultures for centuries, and they are cherished as agents of luck in life. And did you know that the amphibians were the first vertebrates to colonize the land, evolving over 370 million years ago, and have survived already 4 mass extinctions? So don't let them go on our behalf. So don't let them go in this one. Did you know that amphibians have also gone to space? It's true. They have helped NASA in the study of space. I like to think that frogs are to the night what birds are to the day. Can you imagine what the forests and marshes would be like without their course? So I mentioned 9 amazing facts. What does that have to do with 9, the number 9? Well, what's incredible about the number 9 is that we are home to 9 native species of frogs and toads here in Maine. So who are they? Well, one, it's an American toad. Number 2, the gray tree frog. Number 3, spring peeper. Number 4, the bullfrog. Number 5, green frog. Number 6, pickerel frog. Number 7, northern leopard frog. Number 8, mink frog. And rounding up the group, number 9, wood frogs. So these are the 9 frogs and toads that call Maine home. So often we're asked, how does one tell the difference between an amphibian and a reptile? So basically, very simply, an amphibian will have a wet, moisty skin, except for toads and red Fs. And a reptile will have dry, scaly skin. Give you an example. An amphibian could be a frog. A reptile will be a snake. So then we break it down even more, and people will say, well, I don't know if I have a toad or a frog. How can I tell the difference between a toad and a frog? Well, a toad will have a dry, bumpy skin, and a frog will have a moist skin, for the most part. A toad, for the most part, will live on land, and a frog, for the most part, will live in the water. Toads will have shorter legs, while, for the most part, frogs will have long, powerful legs. Believe it or not, toads are toothless, but yet, can you believe some frogs have teeth? So these are different ways that you can tell the difference between a toad and a frog. So let's take a quick look at the anatomy of a toad. Well, there are several things that need to be pointed out, but one of the things that are most important to be pointed out is the seat patch. Take a look at it. It's right at where the stomach would be. That's going to play an important factor when we get into discussing toads. So among that, this is what a toad, the dry, bumpy skin, the temperum for the ear, the hind legs, the bony ridge, the gold around the eyes for better seeing. Those are things. So, okay, here we go with question number 1. Toads and frogs. Question number 1. What is the name of Maine's only toad? Is it A, oak toad? Is it B, American toad? Is it C, green toad? Let's take a few minutes and put in your guess, and let's see what we come up with. And here are the, excellent. Maine is home to the American toad. So let's close this out. And let's. So here's the American toad. It happens to be the only toad that Maine has. We only have one toad here in the state of Maine. It lives in almost every habitat except for saltwater. It's widespread throughout the state of Maine. Its breeding season is right now, usually April through May. And it's one of the rare times that you will catch a toad in the water. And what they're doing is they're utilizing vernal pools to lay their eggs. Long, stringy eggs that are primarily attached to the bottom of the vernal pool. And that's how you can tell if you've had a toad there. But this is the time that they're using. They eat up to 1,000 insects every day. These are, for people who like enjoying their backyards, this is the toad of choice to have to help keep the mosquito population down. I mentioned that they have a seat patch. That seat patch, which again is at the belly of the toad, they don't drink like you and I drink through their nostrils or their mouth. What they'll do is they'll drink through and absorb the water into their bellies. And that's how they do it. So it's through absorption that they get their moisture. They're usually anywhere between 2 to 4.5 inches long. And their calls can last up to 30 seconds or more. And right now they're enjoying a least concern status in the state of Maine. Well, let's give a list. Let's hear a toad sound like. So right now we're coming out of the hibernation season and we're going into where we're going to have the opportunity to see our toads on the ground. But where do they hibernate in the winter? Well, if you notice by the anatomy, they don't have any webbing in the front of their feet. So they are excellent diggers. And so what they'll do come late fall, they will dig deep into the soil, safely below the frost line, and spend the winter there. And then it's usually occurring when the big night occurs, which is usually in April, early May, where the first warm night, usually above 40 to 50 degrees, and after an all-day rain, it says, hey, it's time to wake up and come out and find your mate and breed and lay your eggs and have baby toads. So they're going to stay asleep in the frost line until that particular time. So here's a little fun fact about toads. Contrary to popular belief, you will not develop warts if you touch a toad. So they do emit a secretion, but it's not going to create warts for you. So again, let's turn our attention now to frogs. And again, these are the anatomies, a quick look at the anatomy of the frog. And so we're going to go into question number 2. Which Maine species of frog will often stay in a tadpole stage up to 2 years before becoming a frog? Is it A, bullfrog? Is it B, mink frog? Is it C, wood frog? And the answer is bullfrog. They will actually stay in the tadpole stage up to 2 years before progressing into an adult bullfrog. So very good. So let's take a closer look at the North American bullfrog. Well, it lives in shallow freshwater. Usually you're going to find them on the edges of lakes and ponds. They are found throughout the state of Maine. They usually can grow up to 8 inches, and how that's measured is usually from the tip of their nose to the vent, which is a nice way of saying the rear end on their back. So they are usually, they're large, and they will grow up to 8 inches. They're late breeders though, June and July, and maturity is reached only at 4 to 5 years. So again, before them to breed, and normally they may last up to about 10 years in the wild. So they have a good 5 years to reproduce after they reach maturity at 5. They're ambush predators. What that simply means is that will sit and they'll wait for prey to come along. And it's basically anything fit in their mouth. As I mentioned, in the stomach of a bullfrog, you may find anything, even fish, maybe even small rodents, small snakes, anything that they can fit. And this is one of those that have teeth. So once they grab it, they hold on to their prey and then force it back down through into their stomach. As I mentioned, they can live up to 10 years in the wild. And they're named because the males produce a cow-like mooing sound. And right now they're enjoying a least concerned status here in Maine, which is good. But let's give a listen. So again, where do bullfrogs hibernate in the winter? Well, they will typically hibernate underwater. It's a common misconception that they will spend the winter the way some turtles do, and that them dig themselves deep into the mud. In fact, hibernating bullfrogs will suffocate if they dig themselves into the mud for any extended period of time. So hibernating frogs, however, must be near an oxygen-rich water and spend a good portion of the winter just lying on top of the mud, or particularly buried. They may even slowly swim around. So it's not unusual if you happen to be looking down through the ice, you might see a bullfrog swimming here and there. They're fine. There's no need to panic. They're not trapped under the ice. It's just the way that they're doing it. So here's our space travelers. November 1970, NASA launched 2 bullfrogs into space for the study of weightlessness. So I was going to say both of these bullfrogs that were sent into space live right here in Maine, but that's not true. But they were space travelers. So again, let's go into question number 3. Which Maine species of frog can be distinguished by the dark-colored X across their back? Is it A, green frog? Is it B, gray frog? Is it C, spring peeper? Correct. It is the spring peeper has a distinguishing black X on their back. So again, let's take a look at a spring peeper. Here's what they are. Spring peepers are found in mixed woodlands near ponds and marshes and swamps. Also roadside ditches or anywhere else that a vernal pool could exist. They are located throughout Maine. And as we all know, they're usually the first sign of spring. And before we started, some of the people were commenting that they are hearing spring peepers loud and clear in various portions of the state. So that's a good sign, an excellent sign. They can freeze and survive. They are Maine's smallest frog, usually between 1 to 1.5 inches long. And a chorus of peepers could be heard half a mile away. So right now they're enjoying the least concerned status here in the state of Maine, which is excellent. So let's give a listen to what a peeper sounds like. So again, where do spring peepers hibernate in the winter? Well, in the winter, because they are terrestrial by nature for the most part, they will live under logs or behind loose bark or trees, waiting for the spring thaw and their chance to sing. They can also allow most of their body to freeze during the winter hibernation and still survive. So they are one of Maine's tree frogs. And so what they'll do is they have the capability of freezing up to 80% of their body with their antifreeze and be able to survive the winter weather that way. So here's a little fun fact. Did you know a group of toads is called a knot and a group of frogs is called an army? So we're going right into question number 4. Which Maine species of frog is not only found in our state, but is the only amphibian found as far north as the Arctic Circle? Is it A, North American bullfrog? Is it B, wood frog? Is it C, northern leopard frog? Take a few minutes here to go ahead and put your answers in. And the answer is wood frogs. Wood frogs, because of their ability to survive very cold weather, have they made that transition to be as far north as the Arctic Circle. So here's a typical wood frog. They are entirely land-based except during breeding season. And wood frogs are one of the ones that you're going to find when you do your big night. These are, you'll find your spotted salamanders, your wood frogs, and your peepers. These are the first ones to come out in spring. And so they have been hibernating all winter long. The warm spring rains have come, and it's time for them to go. They are found, this is one of the most popular frogs found throughout the state of Maine. And as I said, they are the first to breed preferring vernal pools. And so maybe we should take a minute here to explain what exactly a vernal pool is. A vernal pool is a body of water. It's usually a ditch or gully that's filled up with either spring rain or winter melt, snow melt. And there's no infeed or outfeed, and it is fish free. So it's kind of a safe water breeding area for the frogs and the salamanders to lay their eggs, because they're not going to be eaten up by fish or so on. But that's what a vernal pool is. So you can find them virtually anywhere. Their life expectancy in the wild, and they can grow up to 2 to 3 inches long. And the distinguishing characteristic about them is the fact that they have a mask. What they have looks like a robber's mask along their eyes. So that's how you can tell that you have a wood frog. They are also being studied for human donor organ transplant because of that ability to freeze up to 80% of their body. Scientists are now studying wood frogs to see if they can prolong the life shelf expectancy of transplanted organs, and they're using the wood frogs to be assistants in helping them do that. To hear what a wood frog sounds like, it sounds like a duck quacking. And right now they have the status of least concern. Now, several of the species that we've already talked about have a least concern status, which is excellent for us here in the state of Maine, which means that we are keeping our water systems clear and polluted and free of pollution. So again, all these species are great indicators. These are the canaries in the coal mine, as they like to say. So if the bad air would develop, the canaries would be the first to go, and that's the way people would determine whether they had good or bad quality air. The same thing with our amphibians. If we start to see less and less of them, we're starting to realize that we might have some water pollution or other factors, maybe some warming effects, maybe the evaporation of vernal pools. But for right now, we have a least concern. So let's give a listen to what a wood frog would sound like and see if you agree that it sounds like ducks quacking. So where do wood frogs hibernate in the winter? Well, they usually hibernate nesting down into leafy litter on forest floors. And here's a little fun fact. Wood frogs do not have web feet, front feet, since they spend so much of their time in the forest. Again, the only time you're going to see is that short period of time when they are prolific breeders and they're in the vernal pool. And that could be a week at most, and then they're back out. They've made their way back into it. And it's my understanding that usually when they go into the vernal pools, the first one's in or the first one's out, and they usually go in the same entrance as the way that they came out. So these are just some of the little about how important our vernal pools are. So again, question number 5. Which Maine species of frog has an astounding capability to camouflage themselves and that has an adhesive toe pads suited for climbing? Is it, I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. Which Maine species? Is it a pickerel frog, B, spring peeper, C, gray tree frog? The answer is gray tree frog. Yeah, but only, and you guys are so smart, because really what I thought would be, what would throw you off is gray, which is a great camouflaging effect. But there is a particular, tree frogs also will blend into their surroundings. In fact, the introduction to this talk this evening, you'll see a frog on there and it's green. And that truly is a gray tree frog that blended into its natural surroundings, which I found on the side of a pond here in the Down East area. And it literally blended itself to become green. And so that was the importance of that. So they can change. In fact, there you go. Here's our little gray tree frog. And a lot of you will say, hey, that's not gray, that's green. And that's exactly what it is. So they inhabit forests, perches on trees and shrubs, branches. So they're not the frogs that are going to hang out in the water and sit there and just be at eye level and wait for prey to come by. They're going to be, if you're looking to find your gray tree frogs, you're going to find them in the forest, on trees, or in shrubs, and so on. They also are found mostly in the southern and central Maine area. They're late breeders, waiting until the air temperature is over 68 degrees. They can live up to, and I'm having you. They can live up to 8 years in the wild and grow up to 2.5 inches long. And during hibernation, as I mentioned, same with this spring peepers, 80% of their body freezes. And they have the loudest call measured for North American frogs. And right now, they're least concerned here in the state. So let's give a listen. So where do gray tree frogs hibernate in the winter? Well, they hibernate under tree roots and leaves. And I have to admit, I'm not supposed to have a favorite, but I have to tell you, it's just between you and me, just us. Gray tree frogs are my favorite. They're very unique. They have the pads to be able to grip and walk up the sides of walls or onto windows and so on. These are the ones that you may have the good fortune if you're in a camp or by your house and find them on your window ledge or in the evening climbing up your window. So it's an amazing feat that they have. So again, fun facts. Did you know that a frog's age can be determined by its growth rings? The bones that form a growth ring every year when a frog is hibernating. So that's one way of determining it, is similar to that of a tree. It's the same way that we can determine the age of a frog. So let's go to question number 6. Which Maine species of frog sometimes goes by these other names? Grass frog, meadow frog, shag frog, and a herring hopper? Is it A, green frog? Is it B, northern leopard frog? Is it C, mink frog? It is our northern leopard frog. They go by multiple names. So the northern leopard frog is known as other, such as a grass frog or meadow frog, shad or herring hopper. So again, this is what a northern leopard frog will look like. This is the back, and this is important that I'm pointing out. And when we get into what a pickerel frog looks like in a northern leopard frog, spots mean everything. As you can see, the spots in the back of this northern leopard frog are not very well organized. They're not running in parallel. They're helter-skeltered in the back, and that's what is a good way of determining whether they are. They usually live near a permanent water source, and they can grow up to 2 to 4 inches. They cover the entire state of Maine, but they're not as popular as their counterpart, the pickerel frog. Their life expectancy can be anywhere between 5 to 8 years. They have those 2 to 3 uneven spaced rows of irregular oval-shaped dark spots, as I mentioned. These are the hoppers. These are the Mark Twain hoppers here. They can clear a span of 8 feet in a single leap. That's 15 times their body length. So they can jump incredible feet. And they do usually have 3 distinct calls. One, a mating call, one, a warning call, and one when things get a little heated during their mating season. And males may mount males and they're saying, hey, I'm not who you're looking for, get off call. So they have those 3 distinct calls. And unfortunately, right now, they are under special concern. For many of you who are sitting watching this presentation and you had a high school biology class or even extended into your college, one of the frogs of choice for dissection was this particular frog. It was the northern leopard frog. And this was used primarily for a lot of the dissection early on. The second thing is they're popular among the restaurant industry for their legs. And so that is what's causing them to have a big concern and a special concern right now. To me, that sounded a little bit like a leopard growling, so that's maybe where they get it. So where do northern leopard frogs hibernate in the winter? Well, they usually hibernate in the water that will not completely freeze over in the winter. So again, this goes back to they're not going to bury themselves deeply into the mud because they couldn't survive, but they will hibernate in the water. And again, they'll need that oxygen-rich water, which is not going to freeze over in the winter. So did you know that the northern leopard frog uses its eyes to help with swallowing food? The northern leopard frog retracts its eyes and then uses them to help push down their food down their throat. So we're advancing, and while we're into question number 7, which Maine species of frog produces a scent which smells like a mink? Is it A, mink frog? Is it B, northern leopard frog? Is it C, pickerel frog? Let's give the old college try and see how many of us can get this one right. Excellent. Almost all of us got it right. It is the mink frog that produces a scent when endangered that gives off, it smells similar to a mink. So I've never really gone up and smelled a mink, but I am going to believe in our biologists to say that that's truly what it smells like. So again, this is what a mink frog will look like. It's truly a frog of the north. It needs that clear, clean, cold water, fresh water in order to survive. It's exclusively aquatic, preferring shallow water, and will float on lily pads and pickerel reeds and wait in an ambush predator state. It's medium size, usually anywhere between 2 to 3 inches long. Its breeding season is spring and early summer, and has been known to live in the wild up to 6 years. They're, once again, when threatened or handled, they will produce a musty odor similar to that of what a mink smells like. And their diets usually consists of spiders and snails and beetles and other invertebrates. And they make a rapid tap, tap, tap sound, representing 2 pieces of wood being tapped together. That's what a mink will sound like. And right now, they're enjoying a least concern status here in the state of Maine. So let's give a listen and see if you agree if we have 2 pieces of wood being tapped. So here's a fun fact. People who study frogs and toads are called herpetologists. Herpetology is the study of amphibians and reptiles. And I must give a shout out to our inland fishery group, because we have an entire staff of dedicated and incredible, knowledgeable herpetologists on staff that are protecting our amphibians and reptile status. And we're very fortunate that they have chosen to make Maine their home, and they're out there supporting our amphibians and reptiles every day. So again, where do mink frogs hibernate? Well, they will hibernate using the deep water technique. That means they will dive deep into the water below, and they will stay there until the winter, the spring thaw. So we're moving on. We said there's 9 questions. Now we're at number 8. Which Maine species of frog is, oh, this is a toughie. Which Maine species of frog is the only native poisonous species found in the United States? Is it A, pickerel frog? Is it B, northern leopard frog? Is it C, wood frog? Excellent. It is the pickerel frog. There's a little story behind this. Now, I don't know how true it is, but the myth is this. There were 2 gentlemen from the down east area. They were out in the woods. They were drinking several adult beverages, and they came across a wood frog, pickerel frog. I'm sorry. They came across a pickerel frog, and one of the down easters dared the other one to go ahead and eat it. And so the other one took up the challenge and ate it, and unfortunately within hours passed away. I don't know how true that is, but that's just a little story that's shared up here. One of the things that you have to be cautious about is they do emit a toxin, and that's why even if you're out frog collecting, do not put your pickerel frogs in with your other frogs, because of the toxin that it does emit. It can kill other frogs that are in there. And if you do happen to be handling it, it is suggested that you do take the time to go ahead and thoroughly wash off your hands when handling a pickerel frog. So again, remember, we talked about the northern leopard frog and the uneven spots in the back. Here's an example of a pickerel frog that has a more even row of spots on the back. That's one of the quick indicators that you can tell whether you have a pickerel or a northern leopard. They usually enjoy spring runs, hilly ravines, and even sphagnum bogs. They are widespread, more widespread in Maine than, say, their counterpart, the northern leopard frog. And they usually emerge from hibernation in late April to early May, and then begin their breeding. They're bronze in color, whereas the northern leopard frog is green, and they do have those two hand-drawn parallel rows of square spots down their back. And they are one of the better of the amphibians that we have as an indicator species, because if you are fortunate to have a pickerel frog on your property or in your location where you enjoy the aspect of walking in nature, this is a good, because they're saying that water pollution, if you have any polluted water, you're not going to have any pickerel frogs nearby. And so, imagine, now we have to find out what they sound like. So we're out looking for them. So imagine a pickerel fisherman has fallen asleep. So he is snoring, this fisherman is, and that is what a pickerel frog sounds like. And so again, right now in the state of Maine, we're enjoying at least concerned. And this is our snoring pickerel frog fisherman. So again, where do pickerel frogs hibernate in the winter? Well, they will hibernate under the silt and debris in their own aquatic environment. So again, they're going to hibernate in the water throughout the winter until the spring thaw comes. So here's a fun fact. Most frogs have teeth, although usually only in the upper jaw. The teeth are used to hold prey in place until the frog can swallow it. It's more of a way of just holding it in place, not for actually chewing. And so that's an interesting little fun fact. So finally, we made it. We're at question number 9. Which Maine species of frog has a ridge or ridges from behind their eyes down their back? Is it A, bullfrog? Is it B, green frog? Is it C, gray frog? And again, this is a great indicator to distinguish between two of these frogs, whether you have this frog or this frog. In the ridge that goes from its eyes down its back is a great indication that you have this particular frog. It is a green frog, the green frog. This is how you distinguish. They look very, very similar, a little bit off in size, but if you're out there and they're just in that somewhat juvenile state, if you have to pick up a green frog or and you think it's a bullfrog, if you have that ridge going down its back, then you have a green frog. See that? I don't think my cursor is showing you, but there's that distinguishing rib that goes from their eyes down to their vent. So they are typically found on the shores and the banks of ponds, lakes, and streams, hand in hand with their bullfrogs. They're throughout the state of Maine. They can live up to 10 years in the wild. The predominant dorsal lateral fold, which is what we talked about, and they can grow anywhere between 2 to 4 inches long. And I believe we said the bullfrog can go up to 8 inches. So, but in that juvenile state, you don't know if you have a green frog or a tree frog. They have their bulging eyes, and they can make a sound like a loose banjo string. And right now in the state of Maine, we're enjoying least concern. So again, everybody on this panel and everybody that's joined us tonight, we should take a round of applause for how well we're handling our water system, because most of our amphibian frogs, of all the 9, I believe 8 are on least concern status. And again, they're always updating this. So at the time of this presentation, some of that may have changed, but for the most part, we have least concern for our amphibians at this time. And so let's give a listen to what a loose banjo may sound like. So again, where do green frogs hibernate in the winter? Well, that will hibernate just like a bullfrog and a northern leopard frog under the water, but not completely submerged in the mud. And amphibians did you know that amphibians must shed their skin as they get bigger in size? The old skin comes off like a piece of clothing that has become too tight. And usually after they shed their skin, they'll eat it. So that it's usually eaten by the frog. So again, even though we're enjoying the least concern status, we can't rest on our laurels. We need to still look out for what the biggest threats are to our amphibians and reptile friends. Number 1 is habitat fragmentation or loss. And there's a difference between fragmentation could be a road going through a vernal pool. A loss is the vernal pool is completely plowed under. So those are the distinguishing difference. We can all contribute to climate change as an effect. One impact of climate change, as I mentioned, the vernal pools play a very important factor in the early breeders, in the fact that if it gets too warm and the vernal pools dry up because they have no infeed or outfeed, that doesn't give them time to reach the maturity. Not only after they lay their eggs, but after they hatch from their eggs, they still need some time left in that water before they can do it. So that can have an impact. And that's why we all participate in the Big Night program. Roadkill has a tremendous factor on our amphibian friends. So how can you help? Well, just give the frogs some of your time. Walk along, look at them, enjoy them. Be good environmental stewards. Clean up. Make sure your water system is polluted free, non-polluted. And support wildlife rehabilitation and land trusts as the ones that have sponsored us this evening. And the wildlife organizations that are out there. The state is full of wildlife rehabilitators that are out there dedicating their day in and day out to the protection of our species. So again, here's some examples of vernal pools. There just could be patches of water. The one on the bottom is over on Crowley Island here in the Down East area. And it's nothing more than tracks that filled up with rainwater. And that's where all the wood frogs were laying their eggs. In fact, on the right-hand side of the ditch, you can see 2 or 3 groups of eggs. So the next time you're out by a vernal pool, close your eyes, open your mind, and listen to the frogs sing. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was so wonderful. I really learned a lot. And I know people in the chat box have said they've learned a lot as well. And we have some questions rolling in for you if you are up for taking a few of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Maybe Jake and I can scroll through them, and yeah, you can look through them as well and see what people have said. One of the first questions that came in is, are toads ever tadpoles?
Yes. No, technically speaking, they're similar in the nature, because what they do is When a toad lays its eggs, it's in a long string, and when they develop, they're similar to that of a tadpole in nature initially until they grow their legs and lose their tails. So yes.
Cool. Thanks for that, Paul.
Why do some frogs only sing at night like spring peepers? That's a great question. I would say that I think primarily, and this is just me speaking, they have a better chance of protection at night than they do during the day. So they're not going to attract predators to come over, such as great blue herons and some of the others, by giving up sounds. So they will do it in the secrecy of night. And that would probably be my first thoughts about it.
That makes sense.
Oh, look who we have.
A little friend has joined. She likes frogs too.
Yeah, her name is Toad.
Yes.
We have a question from John, and I might say these wrong, and I'm just going to go for it. But what is the difference between lithobates and Rana? And you may have answered that question, but
I think it's a more of a distinguishing difference for the scientific names that they're coming up with. You see that fluctuate a little bit here and there. And I got to tell you, I can list the scientific names. I'm not a great studier, even though I'm a Maine naturalist. That's the part of the program I failed. I can't speak Latin at all. But that's usually what they'll say, is they'll go back and forth. Now, if you have any other insight, the gentleman that asked the question, if you have any other insight, please share it with us. But that's primarily what I'm thinking the difference is.
Great. And thanks for the question, John. He also, Paul, he made a comment about how fascinating your presentation was, and he was hoping that we could maybe do salamanders next at some point. So that would be a great presentation.
Here's my throw out to John. I have done a combination of snakes and salamanders. Now, my limitation was because of COVID-19. We have a number of salamanders and snakes here in Maine, but unfortunately, a lot of them don't end up in the rehabilitation centers that I was able to visit to be able to photograph. Yes, I did get some milk snakes and definitely some garter snakes, but I didn't get the plethora of the snakes that we needed here in the state of Maine. So that was my next thing. Is I know I'm making this a long story, but I was going to try to get back out to these centers and photograph the ringneck snakes and the black racer snakes and several of the others. And from a salamander perspective, some of them are tough and they're more endangered than our friends the frogs. So some of our spring salamanders and our three groups of brook salamanders are hard to find. So you have to spend some time out there. And in the colleges that I was going to try to work with to go out there and identify these species, we all shut down. And it's been a year. It's been over a year since I've been able to go out and photograph. And I was telling Lindy that I have the great opportunity to get into Acadia wildlife in 2 weeks. It'll be the first time I've been out to photograph in over a year and a half, to get back out there and photograph some of their species too. Just a little throw out, if anybody's interested. One of the things that I tried to do with my photos is on Facebook, I have Maine wildlife portraits, which I identify the photo, and then I try to give a description of what the status is in the state of Maine, and a little bit of interesting facts about it. So if anybody wants to go there and look at it, but it doesn't just encompass the amphibians and reptiles, it's the wildlife mammals as well, because I've been able to get some porcupines and some possums and some of the others on there as well. So
that's so fun. Thanks, Paul.
We have frog eggs. Who said that? We have, oh, good for you. Somebody said they had frog eggs. Good for you. Are there poisonous snakes in Maine? There are no poisonous snakes in Maine. Now, there will be an argument about rattlesnakes, timber rattlesnakes on the border of Vermont and maybe New Hampshire, but My friends at Inland Fisheries assure me there are no poisonous snakes, and I got to believe them because I put my hand down there to grab them. So I'm trusting them. But believe it or not, the closest that we may have to a poisonous snake is probably your garter snake. They can give a little toxin that would be an irritant to you. So there are no poisonous snakes. Very informative. Thank you. I'm just reading some of the questions. I hope you don't mind.
No, fine, Paul. We do have 3 hands up. So
Okay.
whenever you're ready, I could see if people want to ask.
Are the one question I want to do real quick, are there laws preventing harvesting? And there are restrictions. Okay, so you can't go in and harvest a bunch of bullfrogs or a bunch of stuff like that. So there are actions that are being taken place. And again, there's a big emphasis on controlling the harvesting of our amphibians and reptiles for the pet trade industry, which is turtles are devastated by the fact of the pet trade industry. So there are laws in place for that. So, okay, sorry. Okay, 3 hands.
No, that's okay. Thanks for answering that question. We have another question that's come in the chat box as well, which is really great. But I think I'll maybe go to the hands for a minute and then we can jump back to that question. Susan Yaruda has had her hand up for a long time. Susan, I don't know if you meant to have your hand up, but I'm going to allow, oh, no. I'm just wondering if she meant to have her hand up or not. If you would like to ask your question, I'm going to allow you to talk now, but if it was a mistake, that's totally fine too. I'm not hearing anything come through, so maybe what I'll do is go to our next hand, and if Susan, if you do want to ask a question, we'll come back to you. All right. I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce your name, but Artis, if you would like to ask a question.
Thanks. I'm the one that asked about the frogs in terms of harvesting and the laws and regulations involved with that. But I've lived in Maine for 30 years and I've never seen frog legs on the menu. But I know that there were some high schools that did have frog, botany and biology classes. What's the state of that now in Maine? Are high schools or colleges even still using these frogs for this kind of, lesson?
Artists, I would probably think that they're not. And I think because they've got that designation of being special concern right now, we're putting a big emphasis on it.
But
I'm not speaking with 100%. They're getting them from say South America or some of these other places that they're coming in for that reason. Now, I have to admit, I spent 15 years in Georgia and frog legs were on the menu.
Oh yeah, they've been on the menu in New York City too. I saw them in the menu in New York City and I've had them and I really, in my youth didn't realize that they were, in danger, really the process involved.
Yeah.
But I've never seen them in Maine, but I'm appalled that they still do this in high school with frogs.
I am too, with all the technology that we have out there and so many other things that they can do, we don't need to be doing this.
And you don't really learn much from it. I mean, I remember I was in 9th grade and they gave me a frog and, it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
And poor South America.
I think what we should be doing is put more of an emphasis on how we should be protecting them.
Yes. I agree totally.
Excellent question. And I'd go out to have dinner with you because we both know we're not going to eat frog legs. So that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks
I'm done with that.
Thank you, Artis. We have another hand raised from Lenza. So we'll see if they want to ask their question next.
Okay.
And Lenza, if you have your hand raised on purpose, you can just unmute yourself.
Oh.
We have frog eggs and I wanted to know what they eat.
What the eggs eat or after they hatch, what will
Yeah.
they eat? They'll call them invertebrates. These are things without really any spines or anything like that. So what you're going to do is, in the same water that the frogs will lay their eggs, mosquitoes love to lay eggs. Okay, so they have little larvae, and what they'll do is, after they're hatched, they have to find a source of food, and so they'll start eating those type of things. Fairies. Believe it or not, we have what we call fairy shrimp, not really shrimp, but they're fairy shrimps that make homes in vernal pools. And so they like to munch on those. They like to munch on mosquitoes, which is really why we should protect them, because these are standing pools of water that are great attraction for mosquitoes. And our frogs are doing us a big, big favor by eating the little mosquitoes. So excellent question. And congratulations on your eggs. Do you know what type of eggs they are? I bet you they're going to be wood frogs, or you may even have some salamanders in there. Did you? Because both of them came out in the spring. Excellent. Keep an eye on them. Let us know.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you so much for your question. It looks like we have one more in the chat box. Somebody's wondering if you can tell us more about the Maine Master Naturalist program, Paul.
How long do you have? I will tell you, it is one of the most intense / awarding programs I have ever participated in. It is a year-long program, and you are taught by so many dedicated professionals on their fields of geology or wildlife or botany or whatever. They come in. It lasts a year. You meet once a month, and it's usually 2 days a month that you meet. And then half of that time you're spent in the field. You're out studying the various titles and so on. I was just so fortunate to be able to get in there and get in with this program. In fact, the reason I knew very little about amphibians and reptiles before I even started this program here, and it was because of the Maine Naturalist program that at the end of the program, you're responsible for doing a capstone project, which is kind of a summation of what you've learned and you have identified something. And for my love of photography and my appreciation for Joel Sartori and the fact that I wanted to learn more about a species that I knew nothing about, I turned it around and did my capstone on Maine's native reptiles and amphibians. So if you ever get the opportunity, and usually how is it, you can go to the Maine Master Naturalist website to find out when the next one is. I think the next class is going to be in southern Maine in Wells, down in the Wells area. But again, COVID has turned everything upside down, so I don't know, but I think that's where the next one is. But they do it statewide. The one that I went to was in Ellsworth. So.
Thank you, Paul. I did put the website link in the chat box, and it says on their website that the next course will be in Wells, but won't start until January 2022. But feel free to look at that.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing that.
And if you can get in, it's incredible. It's incredible. I hope that maybe I can get in as a mentor this time, because there was so much given to you. You almost need a refresher course because there was so much good stuff there. So, is there any other questions that anybody had? I think they've been excellent questions. And like I said, 2 years ago, I started out with, yes, I knew what a frog was and I knew what a snake was, but that was the extent of my knowledge, and this has been great. So,
Paul, do you have any recommendations? Maybe like Big Night or working with Greg LeClaire could be one of them, I guess. But if people want to engage with activism for frogs or citizen science or helping protect them in any way in the state, do you have any resources you want to share or that I could put in a follow-up email?
Yeah, I think one of the most important ones is iNaturalist, okay? Because they have a MARAP program here in the state of Maine, Maine Amphibian Reptiles Atlas programming. And they will openly admit that they don't know everywhere where the species are located. So if there is an effect of climate change and say some of our southern species are moving more north, they need to know about it. And because of the limitation on staff, they're not getting to every location to know where they are. So iNaturalist is a very simple program. I've used it. You take a photograph of it. It's an excellent resource because if you don't know what the species is, because there's a marine garter snake and there's a garter snake, and they can easily identify it for you. You just snap a photograph, put it on there, and then I believe it's tied in with the MARAP. So I think what happens is the Inland Fishery Group can look at the results of the iNaturalist and tie that into their program. There is another program. It's not as fun and it's kind of sad. It is one associated with roadkill counts. And there's a program where they will teach you how to safely go out and look for roadkill and identify that. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. I tried to jot down those resources and I'll put them in a follow-up email as well. And it looks like Jake has shared a wonderful vernal pool video as well if you want to learn more from Martha Bell about vernal pools.
oh, great.
So thank you. And I can
Super.
add that to the follow-up email as well.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all for being so interactive in the audience and sharing your thoughts and your questions. It's been a really fun evening. And thank you, Paul, so much for being here with us again to talk about frogs. I think we all learned so much from you, and I really love your presentation style. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I know our time is coming out, but I want to thank both you and Jake for, I mean, you've been doing this for over a year, and it's been so incredibly informative, and you've taken the time out, and I know how much work has to go into preparing and getting these every week out there. And so from my perspective, and I hope from the audience perspective as well, both of you are doing an incredible job, and we thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Paul.
All right, good night.
Absolutely.
Up to it.
Thanks, Paul. Have a great night, everybody.
All
Bye,
right,
everyone.
bye-bye.